Today's video is brought to you by my Instagram story. If you have an Instagram, follow me at the Beccasphere to get consistent news updates via my story. I don't necessarily post a lot of climate change stuff on my actual posts themselves, but there's a lot of great Instagram pages that I follow, and so I kind of reshare them and provide some news from places like Now This Earth, Climate Good News, Bloomberg Green, Carbon Brief, and many others. So please check out my stories at the Beccasphere for more daily climate news and other cool accounts to follow. Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beccasphere, where we talk about climate news and solutions. You've entered the weekly climate recap, where we look back at what progress is being made to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Or not. This week, we will be covering news from July 6th to 12th, so let's get started. The U.S. House Oversight and Reform Subcommittee on the Environment has issued letters to executives from Exxon, Shell, Chevron, and other larger fossil fuel companies demanding documents and testimony after Greenpeace's video of Exxon executives admitting to paying off lawmakers to vote against climate change policies was leaked recently.
Who's the crucial guys for you?
Well, Senator Capito, who's the ranking member on Environment and Public Works, Joe Manchin, I talk to his office every week, and he is the kingmaker on this because he's a Democrat from West Virginia, which is a very conservative state. So on the Democrat side, we look for the moderates on these issues. So it's the Manchins, it's the Cinemas, it's the Testers.
Exxon is even trying to get through to President Biden through his friend, Senator Chris Coons.
The committee chairman said that he plans to issue subpoenas if the executives refuse to provide information willingly. And he also said that fossil fuel companies have resisted requests for information from Congress more than any other industry sector. This is my shocked face. Let's hope something actually comes from this. We'll see. An international study by the World Weather Attribution Network confirms that the deadly heat wave in the Pacific Northwest could not have happened if not for human-driven climate change. Not only did the heat wave beat records, but in some cases it was over the previous heat record by 5 degrees Celsius. The heat wave killed hundreds of people and exacerbated droughts and wildfires, in addition to literally cooking 1 billion shellfish in their shells. Under normal conditions, this event should only happen once every 1,000 years, but climate change is expected to make this way more common. While climate models are continuously getting more complex, there is variables that are not well tracked, like changing of the jet stream. This could mean that things are going to change in a more extreme way than we currently think, which is scary to think. The drought has also created kind of a fossil fuel feedback in California, and I'm sure other places too, because it's weakened hydropower supplies, forcing energy companies to fall back heavily on natural gas. A report by the U.S. Energy Information Administration reported that California's hydropower is dwindling fast due to lack of water, saying, quote, "In the first 4 months of 2021, hydroelectric generation in California was 37% less than in the same 4 months in 2020 and 71% less than during those months in 2019. If you want to see how certain weather events are made worse by climate change, I recommend checking out a map by Carbon Brief. The link will be in the resource section below, because they have mapped out all the different extreme weather events and explained why those are all extreme and connected to climate change. A new UCLA study published in Nature Communications found that climate change is making extreme rainfall events worse too. This was the first study to take a global look at the connection between climate change and extreme rainfall, rather than previous studies that looked at countrywide focus. Just as a reminder, we are currently at 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. We don't want to get past 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we definitely don't want to get past 2. The European Union is drafting a plan to grow natural carbon sinks such as forests, wetlands, croplands, and grasslands, which involves cutting down on logging and biomass production and protecting environments against worsening wildfires and pests. This is in contradiction with the EU considering forest biomass a form of renewable energy, what Greta and other activists call fake renewables. The proposal is expected to be released Wednesday, July 14th. A new Eurobarometer survey found that for the first time, climate change is a top EU public issue, even surpassing COVID. Climate change is the most mentioned global problem in Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, Ireland, Germany, Belgium, and Finland. But the vast majority of Europeans overall say that they are trying to do their best as individuals, but it's the responsibility of businesses, industry, and government to tackle climate change. And they are completely right. You can read more about the results of that survey by clicking the link in the source section. A new initiative called Race to Zero Breakthroughs Retail Campaign has been launched to encourage retail companies to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Some notable participants so far are H&M, IKEA, and Walmart. The initiative is in partnership with COP26 high-level climate action champions and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. A new study by NASA Sea Level Change Science team found that high tides will exceed current flooding thresholds more often and will be especially noticeable in mid-2030s. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson had this to say, quote, "Low-lying areas near sea level are increasingly at risk and suffering due to the increased flooding, and it will only get worse. The combination of the moon's gravitational pull, rising sea levels, and climate change will continue to exacerbate coastal flooding on our coastlines and across the world. NASA's Sea Level Change team is providing crucial information so that we can plan, protect, and prevent damage to the environment and people's livelihoods affected by flooding." Yeah, unfortunately for us, the moon's orbit is actually going to make this whole thing worse in the 2030s. So thanks, moon. The US-based data needs to be used by local governments and development heads to determine where new buildings should be built and where we need to start managed retreats, like now. The European Central Bank, or ECB, announced it will take a greater account of climate change in its policy decisions, stating, quote, "The ECB will adjust the framework guiding the allocation of corporate bond purchases to incorporate climate change criteria in line with its mandate. These will continue alignment of issuers with, at a minimum, EU legislation implementing the Paris Agreement through climate change-related metrics or commitments of the issuers to such goals. This move includes developing new climate change-based indicators and conducting more climate stress tests." The EU dominated climate news this week by also slapping VW and BMW with $1 billion fines for working together to half-ass their clean technology use between 2009 and 2014, thereby breaking antitrust laws. Basically, they had the technology to reduce nitrogen oxide emissions in their new diesel cars, but didn't put it out on the market. Daimler also did that, but because they ratted out the two, they're not getting fined. Meanwhile, the Australian government is planning to challenge a court ruling which declared that the environment minister has an obligation to consider the harm to the next generation when making decisions like coal expansions. This is literally the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Why are you challenging something like that? Australia is one of the largest coal exporters and one of the few developed countries that has yet to sign carbon emissions reduction plans, so they're doing great. Also in the land of stupid, I feel like I need some sort of thing like how Swoop has with Penn University for this. U.S. Republican Senator from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, called climate change bullshit at a Republican luncheon, or I guess he mouthed the word bullshit. He continued to say, quote, "It was all about creating a state of fear as they try to do with global warming. Oh, I'm sorry, it's climate change now. Yeah, whatever works. Whatever works that you can set up a state of fear so they can step in and alleviate the fear." Now, of course, he's referring to Democrats. On the bright side, the president of the Conservative Climate Coalition, Benji Backer, actually managed to talk about climate change action on Fox News. Fox News is also starting its own weather channel, Fox Weather, which climate scientists are not excited about because they believe it will increase Fox's ability to spread climate misinformation. Many TV news experts are not surprised Fox is entering the weather sphere, which United Talent Agency co-president Jay Schurz says, quote, "All the networks are ramping up for this. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that climate change and the environment will be the story for the next decade." Honestly, I'm glad that more news organizations are covering it, but also when you put it like that, that just sounds like another way for humans to exploit the environment for profits. A new report attributed 9.4% of yearly global deaths between 2000 and 2020 to climate change via extreme weather events. That's about 5 million deaths a year. The vast majority of these deaths have been in Asia. G20 finance leaders met in Venice Saturday to talk about carbon pricing. The first time they've talked about carbon pricing as a tool to tackle climate change. They also talked about how to financially support developing countries' green energy transitions. They need to figure out when and how they're going to provide the $100 billion that the COP26 president wants before the conference. COP26 President Alok Sharma said, quote, "I have to tell you that there is frustration I hear from leaders and ministers in developing countries that these funds still remain uncertain is absolutely palatable." Meanwhile, the G20 countries have already committed at least $297 billion to supporting fossil fuels since the beginning of the pandemic, according to the Overseas Development Institute. So, it's not like they don't have the money. The US and Russia potentially see climate change as a rallying point, as John Kerry, Biden's climate envoy, traveled to Russia to talk with officials there about the crisis. China is the fourth largest greenhouse gas emitter. The US finance company MCSI released their quarterly business net zero tracker, which looks at the progress made by over 9,000 companies worldwide. According to the report, we have 5 years and 8 months before the companies deplete emissions budgets for keeping the global temperature under 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we have 21 years and 5 months before they deplete the budget for keeping the temperature under 2 degrees Celsius. Several companies that have refused to even disclose emissions are unsurprisingly fossil fuel companies such as Coal India, China-based Shangxi Coal and Chemical Industry, and US-based BPF Energy. Some of the companies leading emissions disclosures include Procter & Gamble, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Brookings Holdings, and British American Tobacco, of all things. The report will be linked in the resource section below so you can see the other companies that are being discussed. And finally, despite talks by Biden of promoting clean energy standards last week, reporting has found that the Biden administration has approved about 2,500 drilling permits on public and tribal lands within its first 6 months in office. Biden seems to be between a rock and a hard place as gas prices are at a high due to squabbling within the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC. So shutting down projects in the US would probably not be good for him. But bottom line, Biden's goal to get the US to 100% clean energy by 2035 doesn't look like it's anywhere in sight at the moment. And that was this week's news, which honestly seems a little extra depressing to me. If you want to help and take action, I recommend checking out the latest post by the newsletter Heated. The author, Emily Atkins, provides tons of links where you can help in different ways, though you do have to scroll a bit to get through some of the depressing stuff because she wanted to remind you of all the reasons why you need to take action, I guess. So I'll link it in the resource section below. And again, if you have an Instagram, check out my Instagram story, and also especially check out Climate Good News for some pick-me-ups. There's not as much good climate news in the world, or big good climate news in the world, as I'd like, but there's a little bit, so you might as well know about it. Remember to talk about the climate crisis every single day and to help support your local news organizations. And I will talk to you all later. Bye for now.